My hands shake as I stare at my computer screen. The anonymous email sits in my inbox like a bomb waiting to explode. The subject line reads, "You really thought you could get away with this?" Attached are screenshots of my whistleblower complaint, the one I submitted confidentially to HR just 3 days ago. My heart drops into my stomach. This isn't possible. Ron Mayers, our HR director, personally assured me that everything would remain completely confidential. He looked me straight in the eye and promised my report would be handled with absolute discretion. But here it is. My entire complaint, including specific details about the financial fraud I discovered, forwarded to an anonymous email address. Someone took screenshots of the internal HR system and sent them to me as a warning. Or maybe a threat. I scroll through the images, my pulse racing. Every page of my carefully documented report is there. The invoice padding. The fake reimbursements. The kickback scheme involving 2 senior managers. All of it exposed. Ron leaked it. There's no other explanation. He's the only person who had access to my report. The only person I trusted with the truth. Now I know exactly what kind of man I'm dealing with. 3 months earlier, I was just another compliance officer doing her job. I loved working at Henderson & Associates, a mid-sized consulting firm in downtown Chicago. The work was challenging, my colleagues were smart, and I felt like I was making a real difference ensuring our company operated ethically. That changed the day I noticed something odd in our client billing records. I was reviewing expense reports for our biggest account when I found invoices that didn't make sense. Restaurant bills for meetings that never happened. Hotel charges for business trips that weren't on anyone's calendar. At first, I thought it might be simple mistakes. People mix up dates all the time. But as I dug deeper, a disturbing pattern emerged. The fake expenses were always just under the approval threshold that required additional oversight. The amounts were spread across different departments to avoid detection. Someone was systematically stealing from our clients by padding invoices with fraudulent charges. But who? And how long had this been going on? I spent weeks quietly investigating, staying late to review files without drawing attention. The more I uncovered, the sicker I felt. This wasn't accidental. This was deliberate, organized theft. I wrestled with what to do. Speaking up could destroy my career. Staying quiet made me complicit in fraud. After days of sleepless nights, I made my decision. I couldn't ignore what I'd discovered. Our clients trusted us with their money, and someone was stealing from them. I had to report it. I gathered every piece of evidence I could find. Screenshots of suspicious invoices. Patterns of fake expenses. Email trails showing approvals for meetings that never existed. I built an airtight case that no one could dismiss or ignore. The hardest part was deciding who to report it to. The fraud involved 2 senior managers, Dave Chen from operations and Monica Rodriguez from client services. I couldn't go to them directly. That left HR as my only option. Ron Mayers had been our HR director for 5 years. He had a reputation for being fair and professional. During the company holiday party, he told everyone about his commitment to ethical business practices. He seemed like someone I could trust with something this serious. I scheduled a confidential meeting with Ron and presented my findings. He listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions, and assured me that everything would be handled properly. "This will remain completely confidential," he promised, looking me directly in the eyes. Anonymous complaints are protected by company policy and federal law. No one will ever know this came from you. I believed him completely. The changes started immediately, but they were subtle at first. People who used to greet me warmly in the hallways began giving me cold nods instead. Colleagues who normally included me in lunch plans suddenly forgot to invite me. My manager, Sarah, reassigned me from a high-profile project I'd been leading for months. We need someone with different expertise, she explained, avoiding eye contact. The project went to someone with less experience and fewer qualifications. Meeting invitations stopped coming. Conversations would pause when I walked into rooms, then resume in hushed tones after I left. I felt like I was walking through the office with a scarlet letter pinned to my chest. At first, I tried to convince myself it was paranoia. Maybe I was imagining the cold treatment because I felt guilty about reporting my colleagues. Whistleblowing creates stress, and stress can make you see threats that aren't really there. But the isolation was too consistent to ignore. Too many people were suddenly treating me differently for it to be coincidence. Something was very wrong. My confidential report wasn't confidential anymore. I just didn't know how wrong things had become until I overheard the conversation that changed everything. I was getting coffee in the break room when I heard two colleagues talking quietly around the corner. They didn't know I was there, and their words hit me like ice water. I heard she ratted out Dave and Monica, whispered Jessica from accounting. Really? That's so messed up, replied Tom from marketing. They're both good people. She must be trying to climb the ladder by stepping on others. My blood turned cold. They knew. They knew I had reported Dave and Monica. My anonymous, confidential whistleblower complaint had somehow become office gossip. I stood frozen by the coffee machine, trying to process what I was hearing. How did they know specific names? How did they know the report came from me? There was only one explanation. Someone with access to my complaint had leaked the information. Someone had betrayed my trust and violated company policy by sharing confidential HR information. That someone was Ron Mayers. I walked back to my desk in a daze, my coffee forgotten. The realization was crushing. The person I'd trusted to protect me had sold me out instead. But why? What did Ron gain by destroying my reputation and violating his professional obligations? I was about to find out that Ron's betrayal went much deeper than I could have imagined. I decided to confront Ron directly. I needed to hear him deny it to my face, to see if he would lie to me again. Maybe there was some explanation I wasn't seeing. Maybe someone else had access to my report. I knocked on his office door and asked if we could talk privately. Ron smiled that practiced HR smile and gestured for me to sit down. His office was decorated with motivational posters about teamwork and integrity. The irony was painful. Ron, people seem to know about my whistleblower report, I said carefully. I'm hearing my name connected to specific allegations. That shouldn't be possible if the complaint was truly confidential. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Lauren. We don't even know if any particular report came from you, do we? The words were carefully chosen. Technically, he wasn't admitting anything. But the implication was clear. He knew exactly what report I was talking about, and he was threatening me with plausible deniability. The policy says all whistleblower complaints remain confidential, I pressed. Of course, he replied smoothly. And they do. But you know how office rumors work. People talk. Things get misunderstood. His smile never wavered, but the message was unmistakable. I couldn't prove anything, and he wasn't afraid of my accusations. The retaliation escalated quickly after my confrontation with Ron. Within a week, I was pulled of another important project and assigned to mundane data entry tasks. My performance review, which had always been excellent, suddenly included comments about my collaboration issues and negative attitude. Monica Rodriguez, one of the managers I'd reported for fraud, received a promotion to Senior Client Services Director. The announcement came with praise for her innovative billing strategies and revenue optimization techniques. The same techniques I'd identified as fraudulent theft. My access to certain financial systems was mysteriously revoked due to security updates. Files I needed for my work became unavailable because of server maintenance. Every obstacle was presented with a professional smile and a reasonable excuse. The message was clear: this is what happens to people who don't play along. Ron was methodically dismantling my career while maintaining perfect, plausible deniability. Each action looked reasonable in isolation, but together they formed a pattern of deliberate retaliation. I started documenting everything. Screenshots of my revised performance review. Emails about my reassigned projects. Records of my revoked system access. If Ron wanted to play games, I would make sure I had evidence of every move. I was learning to think like someone who expected to be betrayed. That night, alone in my apartment, I finally broke down. The stress of the last month hit me all at once, and I cried until I had no tears left. I'd done the right thing by reporting fraud, and my reward was professional exile and character assassination. I thought about quitting. It would be easier to walk away and find another job than to fight a system designed to protect people like Ron. Whistleblowers rarely win these battles. The company has lawyers, resources, and institutional power. I had nothing but evidence and determination. But as I sat on my couch surrounded by tissues, I remembered something important. I still had the files. All my research into the billing fraud. Every piece of evidence showing systematic theft from our clients. Ron might be destroying my career, but he couldn't erase the truth. I'd been playing defense since filing my complaint, reacting to Ron's moves and trying to protect myself. It was time to go on offense. I opened my laptop and started planning. If Ron wanted to use his position to retaliate against me, I would use my skills to expose him. He'd made one crucial mistake. He thought I would back down quietly. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The next morning, I started collecting everything. Not just evidence of the original fraud, but documentation of everything that had happened since I filed my complaint. Call logs, meeting notes, project files, email timestamps, anything that could prove the pattern of retaliation. I worked methodically, staying late each night to gather information without drawing attention. I used my compliance training to build an airtight case, documenting every action taken against me and connecting it to the timeline of my whistleblower report. The evidence was overwhelming. My performance had been excellent until 3 days after I filed my complaint. Then suddenly, I was non-collaborative and negative. Projects I'd led successfully for months were reassigned because I lacked necessary expertise. System access I'd had for years was revoked for security reasons. But I needed more than just evidence of retaliation. I needed to understand why Ron was protecting Dave and Monica. What did he gain by covering up their fraud and destroying my career? The answer had to be in the company's financial records. Somewhere in the invoices, expense reports, and reimbursement requests was the connection between Ron and the people he was protecting. I just had to find it. That's when Firewatch reached out to me. The message appeared in my company email as an internal communication, but the sender's address was just a string of numbers. The subject line was simple: I know what Ron did. My first instinct was to delete it. This felt like a trap, another way for Ron to gather evidence against me. But curiosity won out. I opened the message. Lauren, I know Ron leaked your whistleblower complaint. I have proof. But I can't reveal myself yet. Check the shared drive folder marked HR_archive_2024. Look for the subfolder called performance_reviews_confidential. There's something there you need to see. I stared at the message for a long time. This could be anything: a setup, a trap, or genuine help from someone who knew the truth. But what did I have to lose? My career was already destroyed, and Ron was clearly playing by his own rules. I waited until everyone left the office, then accessed the shared drive. The folder was buried deep in the system, protected by security permissions I shouldn't have been able to bypass. But somehow, I had temporary access. Inside were files that made my blood run cold. Draft emails between Ron and upper management discussing how to manage the fallout of my report. Strategies for discrediting the source without violating employment law. Firewatch wasn't setting me up. They were giving me ammunition. The hidden folder contained more than just emails about discrediting me. It held evidence of something much larger, a systematic pattern of covering up financial irregularities to protect valuable employees. I found draft performance reviews for other employees who'd raised concerns about billing practices. All of them had suddenly developed collaboration issues and attitude problems right after flagging suspicious expenses. 3 people in the last 2 years had been forced out of the company after raising questions about financial improprieties. But the most damning evidence was a series of email exchanges between Ron and the company's CFO about managing whistleblower complaints strategically. They discussed which complaints could be contained internally and which ones required more aggressive responses. My complaint fell into the aggressive response category because it involved too much money and too many clients to cover up quietly. So they decided to destroy my credibility instead. I screenshot everything, saved the files to an encrypted drive, and started building a timeline. This wasn't just about retaliating against me. This was about protecting a culture of financial fraud by silencing anyone who tried to expose it. But I still needed to understand Ron's personal motivation. Why was he so invested in protecting Dave and Monica specifically? What was his connection to their fraud? The answer was hidden in plain sight, waiting in the most unlikely place. Firewatcher's next message was more specific. Check Ron's expense reimbursements from the last 6 months. Cross-reference with his personal Venmo account. His username is @RonMayers_Chicago. I found Ron's Venmo through the company holiday party contact list that HR had shared months earlier. Most people had listed their social media handles for team-building purposes. Ron's Venmo history was public, showing a feed of payments and requests going back months. What I found there changed everything. Regular payments to an account labeled JM, the same initials as Jason Marks, the CFO who'd been coordinating with Ron on managing whistleblower complaints. The payments happened every month, always around the time client invoices were processed. The amounts weren't huge, usually between $200 and $500, but they were consistent. And they lined up perfectly with spikes in suspicious billing activity that I documented in my original fraud investigation. Ron wasn't just covering up the fraud. He was profiting from it. Every fake dinner expense, every padded invoice, every fraudulent reimbursement was generating kickbacks that flowed from Jason to Ron through their Venmo accounts. Ron's loyalty wasn't about protecting valuable employees, it was about protecting his own criminal income. I screenshot every transaction, noting dates and amounts. The pattern was undeniable. I spent the weekend building a comprehensive timeline that connected everything. Ron's Venmo payments to Jason Marks aligned perfectly with fraudulent billing activity. The payments increased during months when client projects had the most suspicious expenses. Dave and Monica weren't the masterminds of the fraud, they were middle management following orders from Jason and Ron. The real criminals were at the top, using their positions to steal from clients while destroying anyone who threatened to expose them. My whistleblower complaint hadn't just identified fraud. It had threatened a criminal conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of our company's leadership. That explained Ron's vicious retaliation. If my evidence led to a proper investigation, auditors would discover the kickback scheme. Ron would lose his job, face criminal charges, and probably go to prison. Destroying my credibility was literally a matter of survival for him. But he'd made a crucial mistake. By retaliating so aggressively, he'd given me evidence of his criminal intent. By using company resources to cover up fraud, he'd created a paper trail that connected him to the conspiracy. And by keeping his Venmo transactions public, He documented his own guilt in excruciating detail. I had everything I needed to destroy him. The question was how to use it most effectively. I organized my evidence into 3 categories: the original fraud, the cover-up conspiracy, and the retaliation against me. Each category told part of the story, but together they painted a picture of systematic criminal behavior at the highest levels of our company. The original fraud involved Dave and Monica following orders to pad invoices and create fake expenses. But the money didn't stay with them. It flowed up to Jason and Ron through a complex system of reimbursements and kickbacks. The cover-up conspiracy included Ron's leaked emails about managing whistleblower complaints and his coordination with Jason to discredit employees who raised concerns. They'd turned the HR department into a weapon against their own workers. The retaliation against me was documented through performance reviews, project reassignments, and system access revocations. Every action Ron took was calculated to destroy my career while maintaining plausible deniability. But the smoking gun was Ron's Venmo history. The public record of payments between him and Jason, perfectly timed to coincide with fraudulent billing activity, proved their criminal partnership beyond any reasonable doubt. I saved everything to multiple encrypted drives and cloud storage accounts. If Ron thought he could intimidate me into silence, he was about to learn that I'd documented his crimes better than any prosecutor could have hoped for. Time to stop playing defense and start fighting back. Ron must have sensed that I wasn't backing down, because he escalated his attacks. He called me into a performance review that was really an interrogation designed to build a case for firing me. "Lauren, we need to discuss some concerning patterns in your work," he said, opening a thick file folder. "Multiple colleagues have raised concerns about your attitude and collaboration style." I sat quietly as he read from a litany of complaints that sounded like they'd been written by the same person. Apparently, I was resistant to feedback, unwilling to work as part of a team, and creating a negative environment for my coworkers. "I'm going to be direct with you," Ron continued. "Your performance has declined significantly in recent months. If these issues aren't addressed immediately, we'll have to consider whether this is the right position for you." The subtext was clear: quit now, or be fired for cause. Either way, my career at Henderson and Associates was over unless I stopped pursuing my fraud allegations. I kept my face neutral and my voice calm. "I understand your concerns, Ron. Can you provide specific examples of these performance issues so I can address them?" His confident smile wavered slightly. "We'll compile detailed feedback and schedule a follow-up meeting." But I already knew there would be no specific examples because the complaints were fabricated. Ron was building a fictional case to justify firing me. Unfortunately for him, I was building a very real case to destroy him. That afternoon, I forwarded everything to Sarah Chen, an employment attorney I'd found through a legal referral service. The consultation fee was expensive, but I needed professional advice on how to proceed. Sarah reviewed my evidence over the weekend and called me Monday morning with her assessment. "Lauren, you have a solid retaliation case," she said. "The timeline is clear, and the evidence is well documented. But if you want to prove that Ron deliberately leaked your complaint, you'll need irrefutable evidence tying him to the breach of confidentiality." The Venmo payments were strong evidence of Ron's criminal activity, but they didn't directly prove he'd leaked my whistleblower report. For that, I needed documentation showing his intent to retaliate specifically against me. "Keep gathering evidence," Sarah advised. "Document every interaction with HR. Save every email, record every conversation if your state allows it. The more evidence you have, the stronger your case becomes." I left her office feeling both empowered and frustrated. I had enough evidence to prove Ron was a criminal, but proving he'd violated my whistleblower protection rights required connecting dots that might not be directly connected. I needed Ron to incriminate himself. And I was about to get the perfect opportunity. 2 weeks later, Ron made the mistake that would end his career. He was celebrating at a company happy hour, surrounded by interns and junior employees who hung on his every word. The alcohol loosened his tongue, and his arrogance made him careless. I wasn't at the bar, but Maya, one of the summer interns, was friends with me from the company mentorship program. She texted me later that night with a message that made my heart race. "Lauren, you need to know what Ron said tonight. He was bragging to some people about putting whistleblowers in their place and said employees need to learn there are consequences for creating problems. He specifically mentioned that people who file complaints often find their careers don't work out at the company. Maya heard everything and she's willing to talk if you need her to." This was it. Ron had just confessed to retaliating against whistleblowers in front of witnesses. His own arrogance had given me the missing piece of evidence I needed to prove deliberate retaliation. I called Sarah immediately and told her about Ron's statements. She was excited by the development but cautioned me to be careful about how we used this information. "We need Maya's statement in writing," Sarah said. "And we need to move quickly before Ron realizes what is revealed." It was time to go on the offensive. I spent Tuesday evening drafting the most important email of my career. It was addressed to the company's legal department, ethics board, and board of directors. I BC-said Sarah to ensure she had a copy of everything I sent. The email was surgical in its precision. I laid out the evidence chronologically, starting with my original fraud discovery and ending with Ron's public admission of retaliating against whistleblowers. Each allegation was supported by documentation, screenshots, and witness statements. I included the original invoicing fraud with specific examples and dollar amounts. I attached the emails showing Ron's coordination with Jason to discredit me. I provided the timeline of retaliation, including my performance review changes and project reassignments. And then I delivered the knockout punch, Ron's Venmo transaction history showing regular payments from Jason, timed to coincide with fraudulent billing activity. Dozens of transactions totaling thousands of dollars in what could only be described as kickbacks from criminal fraud. The final paragraph was simple. I am requesting a full investigation into these matters and appropriate disciplinary action against the individuals involved. I am also placing the company on notice that I have retained legal counsel regarding the illegal retaliation I have experienced. I read the email 3 times, checked every attachment, and hit send at exactly 8 p.m. on Tuesday, October 15th. Then I waited. The next day was surreal. I arrived at the office expecting chaos, but everything seemed normal. People went about their usual routines. Ron was in his office taking meetings. Jason walked the halls with his typical confident demeanor. No one spoke to me about the email. No one pulled me aside for questions or demanded explanations. It was as if my nuclear bomb had landed without exploding. By noon, I started to worry that my email had been ignored or deleted. Maybe the legal department was protecting Ron and Jason. Maybe my evidence wasn't as strong as I thought it was. But then I noticed the subtle signs. Hushed conversations that stopped when people saw me. Executives having closed-door meetings that weren't on the calendar. Ron's usual cheerful demeanor replaced by tense, distracted energy. The office felt like a pressure cooker about to explode. Everyone sensed something was happening, but no one knew exactly what. Legal had gone underground, which meant they were taking my allegations seriously. When lawyers disappear into conference rooms and start speaking in whispers, it usually means someone is in serious trouble. The silence was more telling than any immediate response could have been. Thursday morning brought the earthquake I'd been expecting. An announcement went out that the HR department was being temporarily restructured and that Ron Mayers would be pursuing other opportunities effective immediately. Jason Marks was placed on administrative leave pending the completion of an internal audit. Dave and Monica were reassigned to different departments with reduced responsibilities. By lunchtime, The whole office was buzzing with speculation. Most people didn't know the details, but everyone could see that major changes were happening at the highest levels of the company. I was called in for an interview with the legal department that afternoon. 2 attorneys and an HR consultant from an outside firm spent 3 hours asking detailed questions about my fraud discoveries, my interactions with Ron, and the retaliation I'd experienced. I answered every question calmly and professionally, providing additional documentation when requested. I wasn't angry or emotional. I was the anchor in a storm of corporate chaos. "We take these allegations very seriously," the lead attorney told me. "We'll be conducting a thorough investigation and will take appropriate action based on our findings." As I left the conference room, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: hope. Ron fought back the only way he knew how, with blame and denial. According to office gossip, he was furious during his termination meeting. He accused me of fabricating evidence, called the interns unreliable witnesses, and claimed he was being scapegoated for systemic problems he'd tried to fix. But the evidence spoke louder than his protests. The Venmo transactions couldn't be explained away. The emails about managing whistleblowers couldn't be denied. The pattern of retaliation against me and other employees was too clear to dismiss. Sarah sent a letter to the company's legal department offering my full cooperation with their investigation in exchange for protection of my job and a commitment to policy reforms. The letter made it clear that I wasn't looking for a payout. I wanted accountability and change. The company agreed to both demands. Within a week, new policies were announced regarding whistleblower protection and conflict of interest reporting. The legal department would now oversee all fraud allegations instead of HR. Anonymous reporting systems were enhanced with additional confidentiality protections. Ron's career in HR was over. No company would hire him after an investigation revealed that he'd leaked confidential complaints and taken kickbacks from fraudulent billing schemes. He'd destroyed my reputation to protect his criminal enterprise. Now his own reputation was destroyed forever. The fallout continued for weeks. The internal audit revealed that the fraudulent billing scheme had cost clients over $200,000 in inflated charges over 2 years. Jason Marks was terminated and faced potential criminal charges for conspiracy and fraud. Dave and Monica were demoted and placed on probation, but they avoided termination by cooperating with the investigation and providing evidence against Jason and Ron. They'd been following orders from superiors who threatened their jobs if they didn't participate in the fraud. Maya, the intern who'd witnessed Ron's incriminating statements, was offered a full-time position after graduation. The company wanted to show that speaking up was rewarded, not punished. As for me, I received a call from the COO herself. Helen Martinez was a no-nonsense executive who'd built her career on integrity and accountability. "Lauren, I owe you an apology," she said. "What happened to you was completely unacceptable. We failed to protect you when you did the right thing, and we're committed to ensuring this never happens again." She offered me a promotion to Senior Compliance Officer with a substantial raise and direct reporting to her office. My new role would include oversight of whistleblower protections and fraud prevention. I accepted immediately. Sometimes justice comes with a promotion. The company offered me a substantial settlement to avoid any potential lawsuits related to the retaliation I'd experienced. The amount would have covered my legal fees and provided significant compensation for the harm to my career and reputation. I declined. Money wasn't what I wanted. I wanted something more powerful, systemic change that would protect future whistleblowers from experiencing what I'd endured. Instead of a settlement, I negotiated for policy reforms and structural changes. The company agreed to create an independent ethics office reporting directly to the board of directors. Whistleblower complaints would be handled by external investigators, not internal HR staff. Most importantly, The company committed to protecting and promoting employees who reported fraud or misconduct. Speaking up would be recognized as a sign of leadership and integrity, not disloyalty. These changes would outlast any financial settlement and protect countless future employees who found themselves in similar situations. Sometimes the best revenge is making sure your enemy's crimes can never be repeated. Ron had tried to create a culture of fear and silence. I helped create a culture of transparency and accountability instead. The irony was perfect. 6 months later, I was interviewed by a journalist writing about corporate whistleblowing for a major business publication. She was investigating how companies handle internal fraud reports and whether legal protections for whistleblowers were effective in practice. I agreed to speak anonymously about my experience, hoping my story would encourage other people to come forward when they discovered wrongdoing. "What advice would you give to someone who's discovered fraud at their company?" the journalist asked. I thought about Ron's smug confidence when he leaked my complaint. I remembered the isolation and fear I'd felt when my colleagues turned against me. I recalled the moment I decided to fight back instead of giving up. "Document everything," I said. "Collect evidence, save emails, record conversations if your state allows it. The truth is powerful, but only if you can prove it." And what would you say to executives who think they can silence employees by destroying their careers? I smiled, thinking about Ron's current unemployment and criminal investigation. Silence protects power, but receipts protect the truth. The article was published 3 months later and sparked a national conversation about corporate retaliation against whistleblowers. My story had become bigger than just my personal experience. It was a warning to corrupt executives everywhere. Last week, I got an email that made me smile wider than I had in months. It was a reference check request for Ron Mayers, who had apparently applied for an HR position at another Chicago consulting firm. As the new senior compliance officer, reference checks for potential employees with ethics concerns were routed through my office. The irony was so perfect it felt like the universe had a sense of humor. I opened Ron's file and reviewed the investigation summary: terminated for leaking confidential whistleblower complaints, accepting kickbacks from fraudulent billing schemes, and systematically retaliating against employees who reported misconduct. I attached the legal summary to my response email without adding any personal commentary. The facts spoke for themselves. No company would hire someone with that record, and Ron would never work in HR again. As I hit send, I thought about our last conversation when he'd smugly denied leaking my complaint. He'd been so confident that he was untouchable, so certain that his position protected him from consequences. Now he was unemployable, facing potential criminal charges, and applying for jobs he'd never get. I leaned back in my new corner office and whispered the words that perfectly captured this moment: game over. Sometimes the best revenge is simply forwarding the truth to the right people at the right time.